On May 9th, despite a boycott from the West, 29 foreign leaders attended the Victory Day military parade in Moscow. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso attended as a special VIP guest of Russian President Vladimir Putin. 5 other African countries attended as well. Can you explain the significance of this in this moment?
9th May marks a symbolic date, usually termed as the Victory Day. So Victory Day is significantly important, not only for the Russian Federation or other Soviet states, but I'll say generally for the world, especially the revolutionaries who commemorate the defeat of Nazi Germany. So it is a historical moment largely shaped by the Soviet sacrifices and the people's military might. This is not merely about military victory, but also about the affirmation of socialist resistance against fascism. And recently, there have been a number of anti-fascist forums being held in different parts of the world, but especially here in the global south. So I'll say that this particular date is a living, breathing commitment to the collective total liberation of the oppressed people. So it stands as a call to unity, resistance, and enduring strength for the working people of the world, not just here in Africa. But funny enough, this year's event was special. It was special because it made visible the emerging global realignment, one that, increasingly pits the imperialist goal. These are mainly the Western powers, led by NATO, against the rising axis of the anti-imperialist struggle in the global south. But what is this realignment about? What does it signal? For us, I think the first thing is the realignment signals a crisis of legitimacy in the Western liberal capitalist democracies. It actually exposes the failures of the so-called democracies of the West that most countries usually want to get to, or most countries have been conditioned to actually emulate. So for a long time, the West have maintained hegemony, and hegemony is not just necessarily the military might or economic power of the so-called powerful countries, but I think hegemony is more of imposing your interest on society as a whole. But this is what they're losing. It is the soft power that they're losing, as we witness this global shift. Another thing also is the emergence of multipolar institutions that challenge the IMF and World Bank dominance, because recently we also are witnessing the founding of multilateral avenues such as BRICS, talk of the group of 77 plus China, and it's a clear indication of the shift to a rising global south. And this is very significant to us because it guarantees victory for us, the oppressed, and we still need to perfect a concrete program, and have unwavering confidence in our ability to achieve the victory that we want. Because as it is right now, with the US hegemony, unrelenting imperialism, this hasn't worked for our people. And it's clear that it cannot be fixed. But the steps that have been taken by this realignment, it's a stepping stone for us to recognize that there is hope in building a world of dignity for our people. I think thirdly, I'll say that the realignment also brings about the revival of sovereignty and self-determination as a rallying point in the global south. Here in Kenya, the Communist Party Marxist Kenya is advancing the national democratic revolution. That in itself is a call for, unity among progressive forces so as to finish or to complete the independence. Because as we live now, we are not living the freedom we want. We are not living the dignity we want. We are not living the conditions that we actually anticipated for after the sham independence. But with the new defiance, the new resistance, it's more of the revival to reclaim the sovereignty for our people. Also, I think it's a rejection of the Western military intervention. The coups, the regime change in disguise of humanitarianism or combating counterterrorism. So even as we look at the many forums that are being put in place by these rising axis, I think it opens opportunities for us. You also mentioned about President Ibrahim Traoré presence.
We could expand on that because, of course, Traoré has become a symbol of neocolonial anti-imperial resistance, to many a hopeful indication of the shift to a rising global south. I mean, I think his presence at the Victory Day military parade, in a way that he was like a special VIP guest, etc., definitely demonstrates this. But the Western media is painting him as a dangerous dictator who is rolling back civil liberties. Can you explain the significance of him to the movements that you were discussing and his presence at the Victory Day military parade? What does that mean to you? Does that have any wider significance? And what is the reality on the ground?
President Ibrahim Traoré's presence, I think for us it was particularly significant because since he took power back in 2022, Burkina Faso has transformed from a weak outpost of foreign finance capital into a strong, sovereign, and self-reliant nation. It comes with both quantitative and qualitative kind of changes. But under his able leadership, Traore has really changed the logic that has as well as been witnessed with regime change. So Burkina Faso has chanted a new path, a path of national democratic freedoms, talk of free from the dictates of the Bretton Woods institution and economic stranglehold of the CFA franc zone. So Traore's attendance signals a strategic pivot away from the neocolonial influence of France and the Western imperialists towards an alliance rooted in mutual sovereignty, revolutionary Pan-Africanism unity, as well as anti-imperialist struggle, and also an alternative multipolar solidarity. So I think his attendance there reflects on deepening alignment between parts of Africa and emerging multipolar powers like Russia, China, Iran, and even Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. So seeing African nations and even the presence of Traore in such meetings for us brings hope. And I think it's more of a will of growing internationalism and anti-imperialist struggle.
Okay, that's great. As the anti-neocolonial movements across Africa gain momentum, like what you've been discussing, especially with the alliance of the Sahel states and the ejection of French imperialist forces, the US via AFRICOM has been seeking opportunities to replace them. What is your assessment of their ability to make headway? How much American US propaganda are you witnessing on the ground amongst the general public? Is it working to a large extent, or is it like, can people see through this sort of US imperialism soft power?
I think they can because there's been a number. For instance, let me go back to Burkina Faso since the presidency of Ibrahim Traoré. So allow me begin by strongly condemning the recent failed coup attempts in Burkina Faso and other myriad attempts that have happened there before. And obviously, we know they are orchestrated by the imperialists through their regional and local proxies. For us, I think not just Burkina Faso, but African states, they have long history and have been a beacon of resistance and intellectual awakening in the fight against imperialism. And every day is a constant reminder of the indelible contribution of these countries towards their unfinished liberational struggles and building Pan-African unity. But also, in as much as we are in the fight against imperialism, we are also in a propaganda war and also in the battle of ideas. And for us right now, we understand that the popular ideas among the people is the ideas of the elite or the ruling class. And it's because that they have used media and other number of, let me call them social power to control the people. So media is significantly important. And it's not just the propaganda on now Burkina Faso, but we've seen the propaganda on Africa-China relations, the propaganda on issues to do with imperialism and war, and the approaches to the Russia-Ukraine war, the propaganda on the Palestinian plight, and very many. So I think our people are now waking up to this falsehood of, it's called bourgeoisie propaganda, because our urgent task at the moment as revolutionary forces is to struggle for unity among the global left to counter the propaganda of the ruling class from the northern hemisphere and from also these dominant media outlets that we know of. So like I said, hot topics of discussions that are usually propagated are mainly for the imperialist war, such as the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, the ongoing humanitarian crisis, and even the leadership of Captain Traoré. But I would like to demystify the claim of such falsehood in Africa. I think today or right now, we are witnessing massive developments in Burkina Faso. There is the privatization of agriculture through the mass distribution of tractors, motor pumps, farm equipments, and even a few farm inputs like indigenous seeds and fertilizers. And this has surged up production in that country. Also, when we get to look at critical areas of infrastructural development, there is a lot to commend the now government in Burkina Faso, mainly on the Africa China's kind of propaganda that we witness. I think Africans see a lot of opportunity with Chinese investments in Africa. And also, we have to understand that essentially the Communist Party of China doesn't necessarily have control of all the private Chinese investors all over the world. But also, we have to appreciate the state led projects in Africa. Even when we look at the onslaught of our Palestinian people in Gaza, I think for a long time, their struggle has been repressed. But right now, with the crisis in there, there is more elevation and more truth that people are becoming acquainted with. So I think even in the midst of having the imposition of bourgeois propaganda on our people, there are pockets of sparkling truth and actual realities of our people or the oppressed people in different parts of the world.